welcome back to Two Sides of the Same Convo. I don't know what episode this is.
Episode 10 or 11.
10 or 11. We're getting busy. We can feel the uptick. We have so many different guests and so many different things that are coming. Today, our guest I am super excited about. Most of the guests that we have is just appreciation, but this guest is someone that I personally look at as a mentor. I've had the opportunity to work with Tamara, but I don't want to talk about work because I want to talk about kind of who Tamara is, and I want you to just share your story about growing up and all that stuff. But because of your position, because of your role, I do want to kind of give you the floor just to give a formal introduction of who you are professionally. And then I'm going to go into the space of asking personal questions.
Great. Tamara Soraluz. I am, I always will be, I think, a social worker, human services, frontline youth worker. That's how I started my career, was a social worker focused on young people, focused on adolescent services, and went through direct service work as a therapeutic mentor at some point in Boston, and then went through a school system, became a school social worker, became principal of an alternative school setting in Lawrence. So kind of landed in the Merrimack Valley about 10, 15 years ago and loved it, stayed here for the remainder of my career. And now I am at UTech, which is a nonprofit that serves Haver, Lawrence, and Lowell. Here, 18 to 25-year-olds who are the highest risk in our community. I like to think of UTech as a safety net for young people. We are the last stop in many cases. We are the place where they go when there are very few other options. And I love that work. I want to be where I am most needed. And I think that's always driven my decisions for work, for positions, for organizations. And I see the need for UTech. And so I love where I am.
Awesome. I have a quick question for you. So one thing that you probably know we share this. So I had a little small stint as a social worker. I did it for about a year. And what I learned is that being a social worker, very much like a teacher, it requires a certain personality. It requires a certain person to be able to do it successfully. And it sounds like, based on your background, your qualifications, that you have that personality. But at what point in your life as you were growing up, you realized this is definitely for me?
So I think I always wanted to be a person of service. I always, as a child, really understood that things weren't fair and things were not across the board and that people didn't get the same opportunities and services. I understood that as a young immigrant in this country. My family immigrated when I was 10. And so I was old enough to understand life in Peru and life here, and life as an immigrant and life as non-immigrants. And I think I always wanted to do something about it. I always really wanted, at first I thought I would do it through teaching. Both of my parents were teachers in Peru. My grandmother was also a early education teacher, and she was our home growing up when I lived with her. My parents immigrated here before I did, and I lived with my grandparents for 4 years. Became a hub of where to go if you needed something. And I always saw that community service, that approach to people. And my grandmother worked, as teachers do, 80 hours a week. Parents would come to the house and said, I need this or I need that. I need to talk to you about my son. I need to talk about my child. And my grandmother was always available. So I think I always knew I wanted to be a person of service. And as I began to understand more about systems in this country and understand more about how systems were built, I wanted to be in a place where those folks that were not benefiting from those systems, they went where they go, right? And I found out that human services was really a passion for me, and then became a social worker very young. So I would say I was 18 when I decided that I wanted to pursue social work for a career. I went into college with knowing that I wanted to do some human services related work. And I also really loved books as a child. So I was also an English major. And so I was a double major as an undergrad. I really loved to read. I loved to read about different cultures and places I had never been. We were not well-traveled people. We were immigrant family who couldn't go on vacations. And so I read a lot about other continents and other cultures. And I always really wanted to get to know people. And I think that in my job, that is still part of my job. You need to get to know people to best help them, right? So that's part of what I think I love about being in human services.
Oh, that's great.
So I have a question, like, so where, like, I always, when we would work, I would call you, like, the Latina Mary Poppins. You remember? Well, the reason I'm saying that is because, like, you bring, for me, if it's only me, you bring so much joy, even in the most difficult times. When we were at UTEP working closely together, we were dealing with COVID. There was the social unrest that was impacting all the young people. And in the midst of that, you weren't goofy. Like, you're not goofy, like, where it's not, moving things forward. But the smile and the comfort and all of those human things that you always bring into the room, I've never asked you, like, where does that come from? Because, I mean, at what point did you realize, is that just natural? Like, you get what I'm saying? Like, you are a certain way and it's consistent.
Yeah, I don't know where. I think I always wanted to be like my mother, and my mom is that way.
Okay.
My mom is somebody who is very consistent, has always been very consistent in the way she approached parenting, in the way that she approached feelings. I knew exactly what my mom would be okay and not okay with growing up. That was not a mystery to me. And I appreciate that level of safety that I had with her, right? That I knew exactly what her values were. I knew where she was parenting from. And I always wanted to be that way too for other people. Like, I wanted people to know how I was, what my values were. And I think that I have stuck to that always. And one of my values is you treat people as people, right? Like, that is a core value for me, that people go through a lot of things that you know or you may not know, but you treat people with integrity, you treat people with respect, and that is a core value. So you can't shift that. Right? Whether you're feeling sad or feeling mad or feeling stressed, you can't shift that because that's a core value. People deserve that no matter where you are at. Right? And so I think that for me, that became really clear. And I also noticed, right? Like, people build better relationships with people that are consistent across the board. So young people, staff know what I'm okay with and what I'm not okay with, and they know where those values come from. So for me, it's leading from a deeper place, not from a reactive place. And I always appreciated that about my mother, because as an immigrant family, we went through a lot of hardships. And as a child, I would have never known that. She was very steady and she was very consistent.
Can you share? Because, like, so for me, I was born an American, and I didn't learn later the privilege that was. So when you talk about challenges you faced as an immigrant, what are some of the things that you're comfortable, like, this was something that I really either remember or look back at as like a challenge?
Yeah. So I think this is a shared story with a lot of immigrant kids, right? So I immigrated here when I was 10. My family immigrated in the early 90s, and I'm the youngest of three, so I was in the education system the longest. So I started out in American education systems in 5th grade. My parents gave up their careers as teachers to work the jobs that are available here in the States, right? So I saw the shift of seeing my mom as a teacher and somebody that was really well respected for her knowledge and respected for her care, to my mom working to being a house cleaner for all of my life, right? And did that with so much care and respect, because my grandfather said, I don't care what you do, but do it well. There's no room for excuses, even if you're cleaning a bathroom, right? That was something that I think my grandfather instilled in my mom, and then in me. Whatever I'm doing, I'm going to do it well. And so my mom, I think, did that work with a lot of integrity, and is still doing that work with a lot of integrity. But I saw her give up a career that was instilled a lot of pride, right? To do things that gave her pride because it provided for us, right? So the pride piece shifted. She wasn't getting dressed in nice clothes to go to work every day, right? And then I think as an immigrant parent and being the youngest and the one that became the most fluent at English faster because I was younger, I then, like many young immigrant kids, became the translator for the family. Mm-hmm. Right? So that gave me access to a lot of information because I had to translate in meetings, in school meetings, or sometimes in doctors' meetings. So it gave me access to information that I think most children would not have had about their parents, right? And at the same time, I saw my mom walking through it very steadily. She was never stressed, not to me, at least, right? And so we navigated the school system that was really hard at the time. My brother is 5 years older than me. It really struggled in the school system as a 15-year-old immigrant. Very different, boy, brown, right? Very different than your 10-year-old kid. Mm-hmm. And so I saw my mom navigate that system and try and figure things out. I saw my family then experience barriers of like access to purchasing a home, right? We couldn't do that, right? For a really long time, we couldn't do that. I saw my dad sometimes at home, like not at work. And so as a child, you're like, oh, dad's home again, right? This is like a thing. Now as an adult, I'm like, that was not income for that time that my dad was home. Like you don't realize it as a child, right? Mm-hmm. But as an adult, you realize the hardships that your parents go through. Now as a mom, I realize the hardships, right? I can't imagine not being able to advocate for my child in the ways that I want to. Not having the language access to do that, not being able to go to a doctor and speak directly to a doctor, adult to adult. I can't imagine that being a truth for me, right? But it was the reality for many, many immigrant parents. And so we think about survival mode, being in survival mode a lot, right? And also having a childhood where I never went without, right? Like there was always food on the table. There was always clothes on our back. There weren't vacations, right? There wasn't travel. There wasn't exploring, right? We couldn't afford that. But there was always love, right, at home. And there was always a community. Like I think about the strengths of that. All of my family lived within 5 to an hour of each other. They had built this really close-knit community that if somebody needed something, somebody had it. Right. And that, I think that closeness is still really there. My mom is very close with her sisters and we have extended family. And amongst the group, if somebody needs something, you kind of pull together resources. Right. And I really appreciated that now as an adult. But at the time, you just kind of are like, oh, okay, there was a problem last month, but it seems to have been fixed. Right? Like somebody figured it out and not knowing how. But being a person that loves people, I was the kid sitting at the adult table, listening to the conversations, right? I wanted to know what was going on, and so I was, privy to stories, which are not mine. So I don't want to share them. Right. But privy to stories of hardship and trauma and, that I think I just always wanted to know who people, where they came from, right? And I'm still curious right now, right? And more stories come out every time our families go through something, more stories come out about my grandparents when they were young. I just spent 5 days in Peru with my grandma and she told me so many stories and I just love that, I love piecing together the web of stories that brought our family to where we are. But I will say as a child, very sheltered from a lot of that, unless it was my own natural curiosity that brought me a lot of that information.
So much. So I want to ask you a professional question. So you worked in Lawrence. We had Andy Polanco here.
Yes.
Who else do we have?
From Lawrence?
Yeah.
We didn't have anyone else from Lawrence.
Someone was speaking to the culture of Lawrence. But Andy kind of set the culture when he was young and how the gangs kind of spiraled out of control. And then we were talking about politically back when it was small Spanish community, largely Italian. Then it was, now it's largely Spanish. But and this is my perspective. For a long time, it was the majority of the workforce and the communities were Spanish, but still the administrations were not. you know, they was like whatever they were. And now I see Lawrence, in my opinion, in this renaissance of over the last however many years, Latin leadership, Latin development, Latin school administrators. And I feel like there's this sense of urgency that never existed as a kid. Like when I would look at accountability at those old constructs, right? There was no like even thought of the state needs to come in and take everything over. The numbers were way worse and the culture felt way worse. I don't know. But now I do see what I would call this renaissance. And you were part of it in the sense where we didn't know that, but you were working at a school. And you have been where I feel like it's small where all the professionals, we all know and see each other. And I think we're all growing, right? And to this new privilege. So what I'm kind of asking you is from your experience of entering a ever transforming environment, right? And kind of being a leader, what has it been like for you, like with that backdrop? Do you agree or disagree? But you can understand, like, it seems like there's so much changing and it costs so much for leaders,
Yeah.
right? Because you're trying to help all of these different sides. So, like,
Yeah.
when I say that, what do you think of?
Yeah. I think when I entered and began the work at Lawrence, I knew that the population was primarily Spanish speaking, right? And that's something that as a bilingual clinician, like there were not very many of us, right, in the field who could speak Spanish or could speak another language that was highly needed. So I think that honestly, the Renaissance began with just language capacity. And then it turned into something else. But I think it was very concrete, like we need Spanish speakers. The families are Spanish speaking. The children are Spanish speaking. We have a high group of immigrants from Dominican Republic. We need Spanish speaking staff, right? We can't get ahead of it. So I don't think it was a conscious, let's diversify the field. I think it was we don't understand these kids because at the time, the school system in Lawrence was very white. Right? Very, very white. Leaders were very white. Teachers were very white. And culture, this is the beautiful thing about culture, is like you put people together and culture exists. You don't have to work at it, right? It's just what it is. It's just what people bring. And I think that there was a culture among students that was growing and being very set and being structured at the Lawrence Public Schools. And the gap between the culture of the students and the culture of the administrators and the teachers became farther and farther apart, right? And so now we need Spanish speaking capacity, so I came in knowing that I had Spanish speaking capacity, also knowing that I was bicultural, and also understanding that like my culture was different than the culture of Lawrence, right? I was a South American kid. My Spanish was funny to them. I spoke different kinds of Spanish. But we did have these like moments of understanding of culture, of being an other or being an immigrant, right? We could understand that experience, right? And I could understand my young people's experience of coming and entering a school and not understanding people. Like I could, and needing to learn English. So I think that was the beginning of diversifying. However, slowly, as somebody that was in a school setting with majority Latino students and gang-involved young people, I said there is, again, a culture building here. And there is a gap between staff and the students. There's a culture around what respect meant, what in and out of, what influence meant, what power meant to young people that we needed to get ahead of because it was influencing their decision-making during the day. How I run people then for me influences whether I feel like my teacher runs me or whether I run them, right? There was a power dynamic clicks in the building that we needed to get closer to. And we needed folks that have that experience in the building. So we began to really think about, okay, how, the people that know best are the people that live in Lawrence. They know this culture best. And so we began to really be thoughtful about hiring local folks. And then organizations got hip to that, right? Like, Teachers for America began their homegrown program, where they were looking for homegrown teachers and they were placing them locally. And that's part of their recruitment. Back in 2010 to 15, they began their homegrown local program. So now schools that were relying on Teach for America, right, weren't getting teachers from across the state or across the country. We were getting homegrown folks that were living in the communities. And so we began this shift to try and get more leadership that also understood the experiences of young people. We grew folks within. So like I was one of those, right? I was a social worker, then became director of school culture, and then became principal. And then when I became principal, one of our student support specialists, parent coordinator, then we promoted her into the director of school culture position, right? So like we began to try and build within, right? And she's still there as the director of school culture. She's an amazing, amazing human and doing such amazing work at Phoenix. And that was the pattern. It's like one of us grew into this position. We left the gap. We grew within, right? And I think that was really successful because it created for young people, it was a school where they felt seen and they felt like this is a part of my community because people from my community are here. So safety got better. In general, right? Like safety got better. These weren't people that were coming in 9 to 5 and then leaving and I never saw them again. These were people I was seeing in my supermarkets. These were people I was seeing at community events. So it became more of an accountability. It's like I'm actually being held accountable to people from my community. There's difference there, right? Than people that I may see and never see again.
I have 1,000 questions, but
Well, so I know your time is limited, so I do want to kind of pivot towards what you're doing today. But I think it's related to how you just finished with that, because you were saying like when you were working in Lawrence that everyone was kind of like, you were finding people within the community to kind of build up and having them in positions to kind of take over and do the work. But also you're not there anymore. So I guess I would say, or I would ask, like, did you come to a point where you're like, you've done the work and you're like, all right, I think everyone's good now. Now I need to take the next step in my career. And that would be going to UTech, if I understand correctly, right?
Yes. So it was a little bit of, I never went into social work thinking I'm going to become the principal. Like that was not the vision. And I think for most of my career, that has been true. I've never really thought about my next step. I was just really in the moment trying to do the best that I could in the role that I had. And so when the principal decided she was moving on, then the administration of the school came and said to me, what do you think about this role? And I was like, what do you mean? But like, I didn't even realize that the principal was thinking about leaving. And I was like, I don't think I want this role. I want to be with young people. I want to work direct service. I'm not ready to move into administration. And the conversation was like, we have built so much in the last 3 years. Somebody coming in new wouldn't be able to continue that growth.
right.
Right. So I was like a little bit guilt tripped into like, saying like, hey, what about this role? And I think I did it because I understood that to be true. I knew that. I knew we had done so much work from having daily fights at Phoenix to when we opened our building, to young people were in classes, young people were graduating.
Yeah, let me just put a pin to explain that. So Phoenix was a school that if you were not kind of navigating the traditional school, it kind of was an alternative school. But it wasn't just that. Like some people preferred Phoenix. But I just want to give that context that, these were a bunch of people that were having difficulty navigating, I would say, the normal public school construct.
Okay.
It's almost 10. So we got to have you back. We have to have you back. But I have to have one last question for you. I am completely drawn to emotion when I look at television and I see the way the federal government is responding to the immigration. But being someone, like I always say this, and I hate to say it, but it's a reality. Working with young people, I see homeless immigrant young people that turn into they start doing crime and they get a spotlight, which is not fair because it paints this picture like that immigrants are criminals when it's the same problem we're dealing with all the kids. It's just a kid problem. But as someone that has such a rich history, and you've, like me, I think, got over a certain line where, like, sometimes I feel safe, and it really bothers me to see these images because it feels like bullying, it feels like harm, it feels so emotionally wrong. But I'm not an immigrant. So I wanted to ask you that, not to end on a sad note, but I want to ask, what is it like in these times where you're in a country, I think, that there's so much hope, there's so much stuff, but on the other side, what we're seeing right now doesn't feel like the hope and the things that inspired me to be like the best person I could be.
I think this is a new for me. I don't think that in my, my time that I've been an immigrant in the US, that it has ever felt this way, to the point where, like, I just traveled outside of the country and I had a thought of, I might get stopped on my way back, right? And I'm a US citizen and I've been a US citizen for a long time, but that doesn't seem to mean anything right now. And that's the scary part, right? Is feeling like no matter what, even if you are somebody that committed murder and perhaps needs the system to give you a better chance at rehabilitation, right? Or whether you're somebody who has been a leader, been educated, it doesn't matter. You're going to be somewhat treated the same. I think that's what the culture right now is setting, that I could have been stopped at the airport because of my progressive ideas, right? And said, we need to question you further, so that there isn't a differentiation around who is an immigrant. It's just, you're an immigrant, we distrust, right? And I think for somebody who is like so trusting of others, like I tell my young people and my staff all the time, the minute you meet me, you have 100% of my trust, and it's up to you to lose it, right? Like, so for somebody who is so trusting of others and so goes through this world really centering people, it's hard to be at the other end of a system where that doesn't feel like it's being reciprocated, right? So that piece is really hard. And it's also scary because I have undocumented family. Like, we have not been here generations, right? I was not born in this country, and it is scary to think about what could happen to them. It is scary to think about the ways in which they have made so many decisions to set me up well, right? But perhaps have not made decisions to set themselves up well. And that's the sacrifice that a lot of people don't think about, is most undocumented immigrants in this country are working hard to set their children up well. And they have all forgone themselves. Right. And that's what it is, right? That's why they're still undocumented, is because the resources were limited. And either I pour them into my child, or I pour them onto me. And it is the mother's sacrifice that you do that for your children.
Well, I personally want to say thank you. I personally, my thoughts are with all your family that are undocumented, because as a family member, I know that if something happens to my family, it limits my ability to be present, my ability to do the work at the highest capacity I can do it. And one thing that I know from knowing you, that had Tamara not come to Lawrence, had you not come to UTEC, I think we would be missing a lot of the value of where we got together, because you wouldn't be there, and you've helped us, get further, as we've all helped each other. So I just appreciate you. I care about you very much, and I look forward to you coming back. But you do have a meeting.
Yes.
That you have to go.
I know, I'm running.
So anyone that wants to learn more about UTEC, I would definitely, you'll see more UTEC people here. We're going to interview a bunch of people. And any words you want to say to the Two Sides of Convo audience?
I think all I will say is it is important for us to keep having these conversations, because the media is not showing that people are having these conversations, right? So that's the protest, I think, that we get to do.
Yeah, I totally agree. I'm not going to take too much more time, but I'm so glad you came here and spoke with us. We definitely need to have you come back here again to speak with us again. And just to close out real quick, I know there was a little bit of a narrative to say that the country right now is kind of making immigrants feel like the other, but I also feel like to the extent they make citizens who they feel should be the other. And that's definitely not a way to operate a country. It's definitely not a way to treat people like human beings. But I know with the work and that you do treat people like human beings, and that's why so many people respect you. So I'm so glad you're here to join us.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
So much. All right. See you later.
Thank you.